So today we're going to talk about how to form. Brass formation is tricky. First of all, it is my belief and the belief of some others, mainly people that will win, that for brass to fire form properly, it must fit the chamber tightly. I use the term, it must heel closed. The first guns that I got that were done that way were PPCs, and they were done by a big name gunsmith who built me some truly accurate stuff. My second benchmark. I had some truly accurate stuff before, but it was a little more spotty, a little less tractable than the stuff that I had done by this fella. And so someday, if I get their permission, I might share some names. But suffice it to say that very good at their craft. And when I first got the gun from the second guy, the first guy didn't tell me anything about brass, but the guy who set me up with the second gun and another gun for a friend of mine supplied brass and everything with the guns. And I went to close it in the gun, and it was really tight. And I said, hey, is this normal? And he said, oh yeah, grease your bolt lugs, make sure. I talked about that, keep your bolt lugs greased every 25 rounds or so. But in this case, it was about the fire forming. It was about the fact that these new 220 Russian cases had to be popped out. Or maybe they were already blown out to 6 mm. I don't remember. I just know that they were super tight. I think he was blowing them out. I think I bought cases from him that were already blown out to 6. So he was doing all the work, even blowing them out to 6, but they still came tight, extra long. And when I say extra long, I mean that in a positive way, and not extra long. In fact, his stuff was a lot looser than I do now. Now, in some of my other segments here, you'll see that I actually heel it. I just did a fire forming segment, and in that you can see me with a barreled action pinching the bolt closed using the trigger, and that was on some cases that were going closed a lot even easier than I sometimes do. So heel the bolt closed is important. Tight brass is important, and the reason for that is, and I repeat myself, but it bears repeating, people don't realize that the firing impulse is in fact very strong. It's like dropping a 20-pound brick on the cartridge case. So any thoughts of holding the bullet, holding the case back with the bullet in the lands, are just out the window. They're ludicrous, they don't work, they don't do anything. And I've done all this. I remember a measured 13 thousandths of neck tolerance on a neck that was unturned. And further, I've tried super glue, Roy's primer pocket stuff, whatever it was. They had a primer pocket. It's like basically a lady's fingernail polish, but you put it on the primer pockets to keep water from moisture or whatever. Roy's primer pocket sealer. Oh, what did I say? Super glue, epoxy. I've tried everything. When I finally did succeed in getting some to hold, then it just drove the bullets into the lands. So even with a blunt 5 ogive or something, it doesn't really matter. Into the lands is going to go into the lands. It's just, you drop a 20-pound block and it's going to go into the lands. So suffice it to say that my fire forming anymore is the main requirement. I just found some more cases from yesterday when I was trying or a couple days ago when I was trying a neck turning experiment that went awry. What do we got here? Put these over here in the fire forming pile. So, we need to form cases that are tight. Now, the reason the PPC has been so easy and so successful for so long is because you can take 220 Russian cases and fill them up with a fast burning pistol powder and put a wax plug in them and cram them in the gun and fire them, and it'll pop the necks out. Or you can put a 22 bullet in it, make up a load and rattle it down a barrel. There's all kinds of things you can do to blow the neck open as opposed to mandreling it. If you do blow it open, you'll get a longer case by 2 to 6 thousandths. And I think you'll get remarkably better results. Remarkably better. But that's an aside. That's these are all opinions. This is just me sharing things that I've found with you. Take it or leave it. What I really would prefer over and above take it or leave it is, if you haven't already tried it, go try it. If you don't see any facility in it, go try it anyway. Because trust me, I've done it the other way. So what we're going to do today is form some 6 millimeter for a 6x47 out of 6.5 millimeter brass. 6.5 by 47 Lapua cases. We're going to neck them down. Now, at first blush, that necking down seems like, ooh, this would be the best way to go. For the simple reason that if your chamber is long enough that the cases, if you just neck down to the shoulder, would be loose, this allows you to set a false shoulder or a fire forming shoulder, and that's absolutely true. As you get close to the shoulder, when you're necking down, you need to stop short and work your way down, because you might find out that you do need a false fire forming shoulder. I've had a lot of situations where I get guns in here that I reload for because I'm an 07 FFL. I sometimes reload for people, and if I do that, I sometimes have to mandrel up. I have to run cases up on a mandrel and make a fire form shoulder on them just to fire them in the gun that they were intended for. Because most people, in most cases, chamber most guns with go gauges, and they slop them open to where it's impossible to get a crush fit. Hence this whole foo-fa-ra about seating long and instead just short chamber, and the whole problem goes away. So the biggest problem though with just flat out necking down is the fact that the case is unsupported, it's unguided, and cases are neither concentric nor are they of uniform hardness all the way around. It's just a simple fact that they're thicker on one side and or harder on one side, and or the two will sometimes conflict. So in an unsupported state, if you squeeze this up into a die and squeeze it down, it's going to move. Obviously the hard side's going to stay and the soft side's going to go to meet it. So what you end up with is something kind of like this. You've got a case and you're trying to neck this down, you're trying to bring this neck down smaller, so when you go to run your size smaller die over it, whatever this die is, it comes down to squeeze that neck down, and one side kind of stays where it is and the other side goes in, and you end up with these necks that are off center. Now in some cases, like back when I first started making 22 BR out of 6 BR, that's a pretty big neck sizing step, and they were just visually ugly. They were all, every one of them, I mean, you get the occasional one that would go down straight, but all through the box they were all different. Like you hold the loading block up like this, and then they weren't in line. Nothing was in line. So, how do we take care of that? Well, what I chose to do was have a guy named Neil Jones make me a stepped bushing. So this is basically 6.5 on this end and 6 mm on this end. It's not quite that simple. There's actually numbers attached to it, but I put that in my Neil Jones resizing die with the removable replaceable bushings and run a case in there, and as it comes up to here, it is in fact supported even though the shoulders aren't touching anything because the die is way out here, that doesn't matter because this rides up in, and then as it goes up and turns that corner, it's supported. And it necks down part way, halfway, and it does it in a clean, consistent. I might even set it to lower than half. The die comes down to lower than half. But it makes a nice step in it. And I've talked about this in some other videos because I did this. I drew this all out here a week or two ago, but I had the music playing in the background. And when I went to post this up on YouTube, it's my first time, new YouTube channel. I didn't know any better, and come to find out, no, that is verboten. So I'm retaping some of this in retrospect, because what we're doing is somehow we have to neck turn these cases. I've got 6mm necks that would net out at about 273 of their own devices, and I want them turned down to 266. And not only that, I want them turned to 266, and I'm going to try something that's novel to me, which is turning them on the lathe. A fellow on the internet showed a way of turning on the lathe that was awesome. Excellent, wonderful, monstrous, loved it. So I am going to see if I can master that. So far I tried it once, just pushing the shoulders down, getting the fire form right, and then mandreling back up. And I've got that documented. We can take a look at it. But it was a failure. It did not work. Or in the common today's parlance, it was a fail. So I failed at that. So now we're going to do some more, which works out for this retape in this video. And I'm going to take him out in the yard and fire form. We're going to slap those necks into some kind of a schedule and knock those shoulders out to where they're supposed to be using only pistol powder. And I'm going to show you how we do that. I'm going to go through the whole procedure here as to how we neck them and then what we do with them from there on out. So that's our big deal today. I'm going to go ahead. The reason I'm wrapping up here for a second is because I don't want to bore you with the taking apart of the Neil Jones die. It's I got to loosen the set screw and take out a bushing, put in a bushing, and I don't want to make it too long and drawn out here. So I think I'm going to probably end up shutting down while I trade this out. And then I'll be back when we have the stepped bushing in place, although if I can get it out quickly enough, I might just run it another way. I know that I do, because I just did this. Guess I could show you how Neil Jones die works. All you've got to do if you don't like it is shut the video off and go away. So I guess we will waste your time here for just a minute. It won't be the first or the last time that I've done that sort of thing. So, the Neil Jones die comes apart. And this is the only die, that's why I keep using his name, because Neil pioneered techniques that other people don't even understand. And I really believe in giving credit where credit is due. There have been other die makers that have come in now in the last number of years. Some of them have even learned to harden their dies, which has been a fight. That's been another part of it. So this die right here, what you're seeing is not the step. What you're seeing is something that is so totally cool, I can barely stand it, and that is Neil Jones' shoulder containment that's included in the die. Inside the die, if I can get this perfect, this will actually be kind of neat. Not sure. I've got this thing on manual focus so that we're kind of working through the middle of the focal range, but there is the possibility that somewhere in there you guys are able to see. Oh, no you won't, because this isn't the step die. Sometimes I amaze myself. So let me grab some. This right here is in fact a 263 bushing. That's why you couldn't see the step. Still has the shoulder containment, but that's not the stepped die. The stepped die that I was trying to get a picture of is marked But this is kind of, it looks like he's got 286 to 265. That sounds about right. 286 to 265 is probably what we have here. Now let me see if I can get a picture of the step that is inside that bushing. Guess it's not the end of the world one way or the other if we don't get it. But as far as I know, this is the only one in the world. When I called and asked him about it, and he said yes, I was very happy. So you might, I'm not saying that this is something that you can access. I bet that would show up against my hand. Yeah, no, I'm trying. Believe me, the step is in there. So I'm also going to decide which of these I'm going to use. That's a 264. And I'm going to go ahead and use the 264. So we're going to leave the 264 bush out. We're going to put the step bush in. And I guess I can say that we are. Didn't take too terribly long. And we are kind of ready. I'm going to set this up in our highest of high dollar presses here. I use this press all the way through till I'm reloading match ammunition. And it amazes me how that weeds out the fools. Every now and again there'll be some guy that say, how in the world? And then I can explain, and 1 out of 50 of those will go, oh, I see. But 99% of all the people in the world just blow an ever-loving gasket and say, why in the world are you using that cheap, cheap, cheap press? It's because a press is a press. I have 20 of these. I have one in every loading box. I have dies preset. I will, at times, in fact, most of my bench rest setups have got 3 of these presses. And each one of them has a die permanently in it. My die rack is emptying out here because slowly but surely I'm getting my dies put out and dispersed to specific setups. And I've got a whole rack of these over there. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 empty bushings just waiting to accept a die. So there's my rant on that. Let me take a piece of new brass here. This is kind of a mess because I just went through this, and so I'm going to have 2 complete sets here. But let's just see what this one does. Now my stuff is all moved around because it's a mess. What I would normally do here, I'm going to do these one at a time using Imperial sizing die wax, which it doesn't even need. I have enough just from touching the top of that to wax up 4 of these, plus the one that I just did. But just from feel, this should be ready to go, and if not, I will feel it because that's the beauty of this little press, is I can feel everything. Okay. What did I just get there? I think I might have bottomed it out prematurely. It's a good thing I could feel that because I got the neck half sized right down to where I want it. And if I had bumped this any further, the shoulder would have wanted to bump back. So luckily it didn't. So I can still do these by feel though as I'm setting this die up. This is totally backwards, but I can go, okay, we're not touching the shoulder. So I'm going to go ahead and lock this down. Maybe I'll even give it a little bit. Not touching the shoulder. So we're getting that much sizing. And this is specifically and only to provide a guiding means for the next step, This is hard in this. I'm confused and not very good at it, so I'm trying to get you in front of somewhere where we can get a nice light glint on it. There, you can see the step in the neck. So this one is run through the die for the initial, for the guiding means. I'm going to go ahead and shut down, do this rack, then we'll come back, change out the bushings, and move on into the next step.